Everybody, this is Michael Youngblood. I want to say welcome. We're drinking at Moe's.
All right, everybody. Want to thank the sponsor today, Reaper Apparel. Want to encourage everybody to break out of the comfort zone, live their best self, which I very much support. They got great apparel, hats, shirts, beanies, hoodies, all that good shit. Be sure when you go on to reaperapparel.com, use the code DRINKIN for 10% off your order. Let's fucking go. All right, everybody, welcome to Drinking at Moe's. Big Mo here. Be sure YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, share, because it helps with the ping in the ass algorithm they got on that YouTube. We're on pretty much anywhere you can get your podcasts. Today, I have with me, pretty excited, Michael Youngblood. How you doing?
What's up, brother? How you guys doing?
Oh, I can't complain. Dog's acting up a little bit, but, you know, as of recording of this, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so my wife kind of coerced me a little bit into giving her part of hers early. So
yeah,
I guess we'll see what I end up getting, but
right.
she won't let in on any of that. But anyways, stinking dogs. First thing I'd like to start off with everybody with is, what got you started as a fan, and then what got you started making that jump into the business? Because everybody's got their own story. And for those that might not have seen the Facebook Live video that you had posted, where you kind of explained it a little bit, but for those that haven't got to see that.
Yeah. He let me go into as much detail as he could with the time. There was a lot more to the story than what I said. So I mean, I'll explain it the best I can. And are we on a time frame?
No.
Okay. Pretty much. I mean, I was born into the business. I was I think a year old when I was actually introduced. I don't remember it, but I was introduced to the business. And I think the earliest childhood memory that I had was Roddy Piper. I remember standing between his legs and then sitting on his lap, and it was popcorn, hot dog, and Coca-Cola. That's what I was eating. He was feeding it to me, and I didn't know who the guy was. I mean, as a child,
yeah.
But all I remember is being in this big Cadillac. He's sitting like I'm sitting with his legs outside the door, and I'm standing. I remember standing, looking up at him, and Andre the Giant off in the background. And these are, this time this is Crockett / Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Gotcha.
So I'm thinking it was about my dad. My dad got involved in it. I want to say 76. So I was a year old in 76, and then about 79 is when I started actually understanding what was going on as a child.
Gotcha.
And seeing all these, bigger than life characters. The Great Kabuki. Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe, Ole Anderson, not Arn Anderson, but Brad Anderson's dad, Gene Anderson.
Gotcha.
Yeah, all the legends from back in the day. But the most memorable was Piper, Jimmy Valiant, and Andre the Giant.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and my dad and his brother were involved with the JCs, which is a corporation here in North Carolina. And, the JCs were looking for a way to, boost the economy.
Yeah.
So, my dad was the head of that. And, he gave Dusty Rhodes a call, and he talked to Dusty like 2 or 3 different times from my understanding. And they met up in Charlotte, the headquarters in Charlotte, and they sat down and negotiated a 10-year contract. And, through that 10 years, I grew up pretty much, around the business, seeing the guys. My uncle was a taxi driver, My grandfather actually owned the taxi service. So
Uh,
they would pick, the top names up at the airport, take them to the motels, and then take them to the venue. And I
yeah.
would get to ride in the car with them, and then just sit at the venues and watch what goes on in the yes, thank you, Mom. What goes on in the background.
Yeah.
I was seeing not only the wrestling, I was seeing what was the happenings in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I just grew up in the business, man. It's just one thing after another. As I got older, I started understanding more and seeing more. And I eventually, like 6 or 7 years old, I fell in love with the business. And I knew then that's what I wanted to do. And,
Oh yeah. No, and I mean, you bring up some of the guys you got to see around,
yeah.
Piper. And I mean, oh my God, being that age and being around Andre, I can only
Yeah.
imagine. I know my first ever wrestling show I went to was I'm in Nebraska, and it was over at a building that actually got torn down a few years ago. But my dad surprised me with tickets, and there were floor seats right near the entrance. And one of my favorites was in this match. The guy, Ray Traylor, Big Boss
Yeah.
Man,
Big Boss Man.
loved him. And he was going up against Yokozuna.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like a little third grader. And here comes that big ass Yokozuna
Yeah.
walking by me. I'm like, oh. And I was hooked before that, but that like sealed it in for me right there.
Yeah. Yes. I think what really put the nail in the coffin with me, as far as like my love for it, what really nailed it, I would have to say when I seen the Road Warriors and Kerry, yeah, when I seen them for the very first time, I think it was 1986. Of course, the Rock and Roll Express came in '85,
Yeah.
and I got to see those guys all the time. That drew me in, but when I saw the Road Warriors, brother, and coming out the full spikes and the face paint, it was bigger than life, man. And I'm like, I think I was 10 years old, 11 years old. 86, I was 11. So that's what nailed it for me, bro. I was hooked.
Oh, 86, I was about 3, but I do remember first time I saw those guys in particular, that was where I started getting hooked. I saw those guys coming out, the big ass spikes on the shoulder pads and stuff.
Yeah.
I got to see them live at a Monday Night Raw taping here in Omaha once, and they were, without a doubt, one of the only acts that I've ever seen that had me on my feet, like I'm jumping up and down, fanboying like crazy from the moment that music hit to the moment they went to the back.
Yep.
Those guys were just, oh my God.
Iron Man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was it for me, brother. I remember, I think the match that really got me hooked with them was when I saw them wrestle the Samoan SWAT team.
Oh, yeah.
And they tore the house down. It was Fort Bragg or Fayetteville, North Carolina, military base. There were soldiers everywhere, And I remember when the Samoan SWAT team came out, they came out to the song, the Michael Myers song.
Oh, yeah.
And then it got real quiet in the building. And then you heard that boom, boom, boom. Man, that place erupted. I've never heard anything like that in my life. As soon as they walked through that curtain, man, it was a wrap. Awesome match, and that's what really hooked me to the business. And I said I knew then I wanted to do it. I was like, I gotta do this, man.
Yeah. And what got you from that moment when you finally got to the age where you were gonna jump in and start doing it? What was that journey like? Because especially back then, there's all sorts of stories.
Yeah. I wrestled amateur because I was always told if you want to get into pro wrestling, you've got to do amateur. You've got to go. My uncle's Ivan Koloff, so that's my legit shoot uncle. My mother's sister married Ivan in 1980. So he always instilled in me, and so did Renee, if you want to do this, you gotta know the basics.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, what's the basics? I'm just a kid. And then he said amateur wrestling. And so my mom and dad got me involved in Little League Wrestling. And then it went to middle school and then eventually high school. And high school is where I really got interested in competition. And I wanted to be the best that I could be. And I trained year round for this. And then I would go to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I would go to Appalachian State now for summer camps. And that's how I improved. And I happened to meet Flair. Rick Flair, I've met Flair back in the day, but never communicated with him because he's Flair. So yeah. And but I seen him at this tournament, and then he gave me some pointers. And then it went from there. Dan Gable. I was around Dan Gable a lot, which was Iowa Hawkeyes college coach. Dan Severn. And then
I met him a little while ago.
Yeah, he's an awesome dude, man. I talk to Dan all the time on Gmail, and we'll FaceTime each other too. But I've known Dan I turned pro in mixed martial arts in 2017. So that's how I actually, through him got involved in the mixed martial arts. And
okay.
Yeah.
It was funny meeting him, not to interrupt you, but it was funny meeting him because he was at an independent show here in Omaha. And when I walked in, it was like, holy shit. It was like, before you start talking to him, and you haven't started talking to him when you first meet him, he's a pretty intimidating looking dude. Then when you get to talking to him, it's like, oh, dude, he's
a sweetheart, man. He's a gentle giant. He's one of the coolest dudes I've met, but he's one of the kindest people. And he's always been ever since I've known Dan, he's always been involved in some type of business, making money. He's about making that money. I haven't talked to Dan in probably about 5 months. But I know he's been out in Arizona with Shannon the Cannon Rich, which is a guy that I actually fought mixed martial arts back in 2019. That was my last professional fight. But yeah, man, Dan's an awesome fella, awesome guy. You don't mind if I take this sweater off? I'm burning up, brother.
No, you're good. You're good, man.
Okay. I gotta come out of this. But back to the wrestling part, man. I got involved in amateur wrestling, like I said. Went to all conference in high school, state championships. Never won the state championship, placed second and third. And then I think my highest accomplishment in amateur wrestling was the Tar Heel State Classic. I won that 2 years in a row, 171 and 189.
Nice.
And then I got interested in going to the Marine Corps. So I wanted to go into the Marine Corps, and this is kind of funny how this happened. I was on my way where I was born. I was born in Laurinburg, North Carolina. So I was on my way from there to Charlotte to swear in, to do my oath. And Uncle Ivan's school was at Indian Trail, which was about maybe 10, 12 miles from, the building where I had to swear in, the courthouse. And so I told my cousin Edsel Newberry, he was with me. I said, man, let's go by the wrestling school because I know I'm not going to be back here for a while. I was, thinking 12 weeks of boot camp and then who God knows where. And so we stop off at the wrestling school. I remember there's a bunch of cars out in the parking lot, and I'm beating on the door trying to get in. And Uncle Ivan opens up the door and looks at me and says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" In the gimmick voice. And he didn't want to expose the business because my cousin wasn't smart. So he says, "Follow me, follow me." We go back to his office, and he says, "What are you doing up here?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to swear in today, go to Marines." And he looked at me. He said, "Oh no, that ain't gonna happen." So he was like, "You're gonna be a wrestler. You're not going to the Marine Corps." And I thought he was joking, and he was dead serious. He was like, "This is what you need to do. You want to make some money. You want to, see the world and travel and meet, different, types of people. But, I know this is what you've been interested in. Now's the time to do it." I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
So Uncle Ivan trained me for 9 months, and I graduated head of my class. And I think I paid him, I want to say $1,500. and for the school, but it was a little more.
Yeah.
I think it was like 2,500. I got away with 15, and it was worth it. And I learned the basics of what to do in the business, in the ring, and then I learned the business side as well through him. And I was actually, he was smartening me up as we were going through the training.
Yeah.
But the first 3 weeks was hell. It was hell because he put I think it was a 50-pound or a 60-pound rucksack on my back. And he would have me run up and down this hill that was in front of the school. And I would run like a mile up and then a mile back. And I would do that 2 or 3 times. And then I would get in the ring and run the ropes. And I would do that 30, 45 minutes. And this is no bumping at all, no training, no, learning holds and, chokes and all that good stuff. It was just training. And he was trying to see if I quit. And I never did because I was already in shape from the amateur wrestling. So it wasn't a piece of cake. It was rough. But for me, compared to the other guys, it was a breeze.
No,
because I was already in shape.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps.
Yeah. And he, and then from there, after I graduated, he was like, he called me into the office. He was like, I got something for you. I got your first couple matches. You're going to spend 14 days away. He didn't tell me even where I was going. He just had a plane ticket. And so he handed me the plane ticket and gave me a couple $100. It was in an envelope. He said, here, you're going to need this. And then I got on, I flew out like 2 days later. I went to Poughkeepsie, New York, and wrestled for the WWE. My debut match was against Scott Hall. And that's actually on my Facebook page. You can go watch that match on my Facebook page.
I'm gonna do that, definitely.
Yeah. If you scroll down, you'll see the match. You'll see me in the corner and he's beating the hell out of me. That was my debut match. And I think the very next night I had Shawn Michaels and Diesel. And I remember Shawn had a broke hand. He had broke his hand that week. So there wasn't much he could do but super kick and then set on you and pin you. That's all he did to me. Super kick me and then set on me and thanks, kid. He looked down at me, thanks, kid. And I think those 2 matches is what got me in the door at WWE. They liked my attitude. I always kept my mouth shut and ears open. And I remember Scott asking me, he says, kid, how long do you want to do this? I said, as long as I can. So he talked to Tony Gurria and Rene Goulet. So they sat down with me in the locker room. I remember it was not Paul Roma. It was Jim Powers was in the meeting with us. And we were sitting there and he was like, we want to bring you in, handshake, and we'll work you 2-3 days a week. And I did that for 2 years, right at 2 years. And that's how it all began for me, man. I was just hooked on the business. It was like a drug. And that's how I started in wrestling, actually.
That's a pretty great story. In the, one thing that you mentioned, I was wanting to bring up because I actually interviewed, it goes by Alexander Koloff just not that long ago. I actually just released his episode maybe a little over a week ago. And we got to talking about your uncle and stuff. So when you brought him up, I'm like, oh, I remember talking.
It's kind of funny you brought that up. Alex, well, his name is Tyson Dean. Yeah, that's Tyson Dean. Tyson Dean took my spot in that tag team. I was the original. And it was me and Jeff Lewis Neal, who I don't care to even talk about, and Nikita. And I had a legal issue. And at the time of the legal issue, I was going to court and suing this guy, and he was trying to sue me, and my hands were licensed. I got into a fight at the airport. I'll tell you exactly what happened. And so Nikita was like, I can't have this on my resume, and you knocked this reporter out at the airport. Well, he didn't understand the full gist of the story. The reporter assaulted my wife. Yeah. And then when this is the thing, my wife is a Continental Marshal and a Provost Marshal. So it was a TMZ reporter. He approached me, tried to get an interview. And my wife was like, no, because my wife was my manager too. And she was like, no, you're not getting an interview. If you want to do the interview, you'll do it in Philadelphia when he gets off the plane. Because I was on my way to my mixed martial arts fight to fight Shannon the Cannon Rich. It turned into a big hoopla. I was released from the county jail the next morning, all charges dismissed. The judge threw it out, said, don't worry about it, you're good. Then he tried to sue me. I beat him in the courts when he tried to sue me. I turned around, countersued, and won. So at the time all this was going on, Nikita was like, no, I can't have this. And, we're not going to do the call-off. It was called call-off collusion. Thank God I owned the rights to it. I went ahead, I know my wife said, patent the name, patent your name, and that way you own the gimmick.
Oh, yeah. No,
that's why they went with call-off dynasty instead of call-off collusion. And that's what all happened. And me and Jeff did not get along. I mean, we wrestled well together. It was just he was too controlling at trying to control my side of the match, his side of the match, and that's why we went our separate ways.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And in the video, I mentioned the Facebook Live video that you went over kind of an abbreviated version of the story you just told. You mentioned George South in there.
Yeah.
And his name's been popping up a little bit here lately, doing some pretty amazing things, even at the age he's at right now. Yeah. What was it like being around him?
George, I wrestled with George maybe 6 months because when I was doing the WWE, I was also doing PWF. And it was Gary, I can't think of Gary's name, the Italian Stallion.
Yeah.
Style was trying to get me to go to WWE, and I was like, no, I got my own thing. I got my own thing going on. I said, I don't want to do that and to mess up things for myself. But I knew what Gary was doing, or the Italian Stallion. I knew what he was doing. He was stealing money from the boys. And if you read Matt and Jeff Hardy's book, it'll tell you in that book everything that took place. Yeah. But as far as George South goes, I always got along with George. George never did me wrong, never mistreated me, was always respectful. I was respectful to him. I listened to him. I learned a lot from him when I was there. I don't think he was involved in that crap at all. He did go on the road with us, but I don't think he had nothing to do. I just didn't see George doing that.
Yeah.
And I know that they had their separate ways. So, I mean, that's all I know. But, later on after that, I mean, like several years later, I wrestled on shows that George was a part of. I always spoke to him. He spoke to me. Sweet man. He's a sweet man.
I've heard lots of good about him. And then another thing, we were talking about your WWE run. What a lot of people, when they talk to people that have been in WWE, they know a lot more of, the guys that have been on, like today, Monday Night Raw and all this. They don't really know the life of what you would call back at the time, or I guess even now, enhancement talent. What was it like being one of those? Because you're right there along in the locker rooms with all those guys.
Yeah, back then in 94, not to 96, the locker room was a lot tighter. Kayfabe to the utmost. You didn't ask a whole lot of questions. You spoke when spoken to. You just sat back, you watched the monitor, you sat back in a corner, and if somebody, you listen. That's how you learn. That's what a lot of guys today don't understand. And it upsets me with these young guys that come in, and it's so much different today than when I got into the business, because I actually went to wrestling school. I had to graduate. I had to get a certificate, and then I had to be approved by a promoter before I could even get in the ring. When I went up to WWE, I had tryouts. I just didn't get in the ring. I had a tryout that day, and I wrestled twice. And they said, "Well, you're good enough to be a part of the show, so we're going to give you an opportunity this week. You're going to wrestle 4 days." And it was making $250 a night. That's all I made. $1,000 a week. Sometimes it would be a little more if they felt like giving you incentive if you worked your ass off.
Yeah.
But mostly, for the most part, it was $250 a night, 3, sometimes 4 times a week. And thanks to Rene Goulet, Sergeant Slaughter, that happened for me. That's how I came about it. I remember getting some sound advice from Owen and Brett.
Okay.
Because I remember we were in Bushkill, Pennsylvania, and the building we were wrestling in, the motel was right across the street, and then the lobby was across the street. Behind the lobby, there was a bar, and then the motel. And all the wrestlers would go in after the shows, eat, drink, and stuff like that. And I was sitting like 4 tables down, and Owen said, "Hey, man, I seen your match." He says, "How long you been working?" I said, just a couple months. And he was like, I said, "I've been trained. I trained for 9 months," is what I told him. I said, "But I've only been working these past 2 weeks." He said, "Well, you did really good. You bump work and selling. Your selling's excellent." So I remember having that conversation. He said, "Just, if you want to make it here in this company, just keep doing what you're doing." He said, "You've got the goods, just learn to work. If you learn to work, you'll make it." And that's the best advice that I ever received from anybody. And Brett really didn't talk to me. Brett was like shaking his head like, "Yeah, I agree with my brother." And I think Razor Ramon, the first night that I put him over, it made him shine like a diamond. He was really happy with that. And he's the one that actually got me in the door. Yeah. He said, I remember him saying to Pat Patterson and Renee, because they were together. I remember him saying, "Hey, this kid's got it, man. Let him stick around for a little while." And then the approval I think the approval went through Slaughter, because he was the money man. He's the one that paid you. And it bloomed from there. I just did exactly what the guys told me. I guess they liked me because, why would they give me advice? And, I took it and I ran with it. And then in 96, I noticed too, going into 96, my days were shortening because they weren't booking me quite as much. And I'm trying to think of the guy's name that played Gilbert.
The guy that played Gilbert?
Yeah, he did the gimmick Gilbert, like Goldberg.
I'm trying to remember his whole I think it was like Dwayne Gilbert or
Dwayne
something.
Dwayne Gill.
Dwayne Gill, yeah.
Dwayne Gill. He's the one that actually hooked me up with the info for Japan. He was like, get in contact with Abdul the Butcher. So, and Abby lived in Atlanta at the time. I think he still lives there. And I called Abby and I was like, look, because Abby was booking for Japan. And so he said, "Send me some videos and stuff." So I sent him a bunch of videos. I think a year had went by, or a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And next thing you know, I get a call one day. It says, "Hey kid, this is Abdul the Butcher, and how are you doing?" And I finally got to see your videos, and I'm like, wow, 2 years later, because I'm on the Indies at this time, thinking I'm kind of like I feel like I'm in limbo, because I felt like I wasn't going anywhere. I was stagnant. And then all of a sudden, man, out of the blue, he called me and got me booked in Japan, and it was all Japan. And
nice.
And I stayed 21 days. And of course, he gets his booking fee.
Yeah.
But it was, I did that a couple of times, and then I ended up becoming real close with Robert Gibson, the Rock and Roll Express. And then I didn't have to go through Abdul anymore. I just went through Robert Gibson.
Okay.
He helped me. Robert helped me more than anybody.
That's cool. And, you some pretty big names, the both of them. And I was actually going to ask about the career after, the time in WWE when, Indies and into Japan. You kind of talked a little bit about, who helped you along there.
Yeah.
A place that I've especially been interested in going to, Japan.
Mhm.
Closest I've ever gotten was when I was deployed in the Navy and we anchored off of Japan for a little while. I got to see Japan. I just never got to go on shore.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But what was that like? Because a lot of people here in the States, we've seen, especially recently with, how things have been blowing up with
Mhm.
New Japan and Noah.
Yeah.
And what was it like back then, going over there? Because like I
It was
said, I've
tough.
been curious.
It was tough, man. It was tough. It was ass whooping. Only thing that's comparable to what we do here is the outcome. But you get your ass handed to you, and if you don't give it back, they'll give it to you that much more. And I was
Oh,
smartened up by Abby before I even went over there the first time, and he was like, "Look, as much as they give it, you give it back, because if you don't, they're going to run over you."
no,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
and they're not going to
definitely.
respect you. They're not going to respect you,
Mm-hmm.
and then you won't come back, because anybody that doesn't give it back as good as you get it, you're not going back.
You
Yeah.
you bring that up. I can definitely understand that, because some of my personal favorites right now that are over there. I remember first time I ever saw Tomohiro Ishii over there in Japan, and you see here in the States, when people throwing like headbutts,
Yeah.
and it's like you can almost tell it's like, okay, I can see them selling it, making it look as if like ouch.
Yeah.
But his match, you can literally hear the bone on bone just smack, and I'm like, first time I saw that, I'm like, ow, my head hurts just watching that.
That it was painful, but I liked it. I guess because I had already endured what I did in amateur wrestling. But that's when I first seen mixed martial arts. But it wasn't called mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
We would go to the dojo, and it would be a lot of jujitsu, a lot of karate, and what was it? Krav Maga.
Yeah. The
and
Israeli army.
Yeah, badass shit, And I went to a couple of those. I never trained while I was over there as far as the jujitsu. I just went and just watched and would try to, learn different things and use some of their techniques in the ring.
Gotcha.
And then I only went to All Japan once. And then all the other times that I went to Japan was USO tours. Yeah. So it was because it was real hard to get in over there. If you had to know somebody.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. Because if you don't, like I said, I went through Abby, and then the second time that I went through Robert Gibson, and I did 16 tours total with the USO.
Okay.
So we would do, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Thailand. I think we went to England 4 or 5 different times. Where else do we go? Hawaii twice. Loved Hawaii, Guam, and the worst place we were at, and Leilani Kai can vouch for this too. Leilani Kai is a dear friend. We went to Diego Garcia, and it's a little island about 2 miles long, 2 miles wide. 120 degrees every day. Every day. And when it rained, it poured, but for little bits at a time. And I remember we wrestled one time, but we ended up staying 4 weeks, and I'll tell you why. And there was a joke on the island, and I noticed everybody walking around the island with these T-shirts on, and it was a guy standing with holding his luggage, looking out like he's looking for his plane, And I was thinking, man, that's a cool shirt. I said, but what does it mean? What does it mean? And the soldiers there would never tell you. They just look at you and laugh. And the island was owned by the British and the US. So one side was British and one side was, the American. So anyway, we wrestled, we get ready to leave that following week, and we go to the airport. and Leilani Kai was with me, and I was red as a lobster, bro. I had got sunburned really bad from being on the ocean fishing. And so it was me, Leilani, Rock and Roll Express, God, Mad Max, Ricky Nelson, Jungle Jim Steele, and we were sitting at this airport, and we were waiting, and we're waiting, and we see these planes coming in, but wasn't our plane. So they said, well, your plane's been delayed. We have a mechanical issue, come back tomorrow. Well, this went on for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And we would go down there every day, same time, and wait and wait and wait. So finally we said, fuck it. We're not doing this. When the plane gets here, you call us, we'll come to you.
Yeah.
And so you had 30 wrestlers total, 2 ring crew, announcer, and I think 2 referees, and the promoters and the agents. And there was a restaurant there. And I remember we went to the restaurant, we drank up all their beer, we eat up all their shrimp, eat up all their steaks, and they were constantly having to go out onto the sea to the big boats to get more food and bring it inward. So I remember they were pissed, man. The British people were pissed with us. They didn't want us on the island. You had the Filipinos there that were working with the U.S. And they were like, we don't want them here. They got to go. And they could never get us a flight in quick enough to get us off this island. We ended up sitting there 4 weeks, man. All we did was eat, drink beer, and fish.
It sounds like a pretty good time to me.
Yeah. Oh, Tracy Smothers was with us, man.
Oh.
And I had more fun with Tracy, Robert, Ricky, Jim Rocha. Wasn't the Heavenly Body. Stephen Dunn, well done.
Okay.
Tag team, well done. They were with us. And all we did was when we were in Guam, we golfed. That's how I learned to golf. Tracy Smothers taught me how to golf. I had a blast with Tracy. Had a blast with him. But yeah, man, that's what it was like there our last 4 weeks. And I missed the birth of my son too while I was over there.
Mm.
He was born October the 7th, and we didn't get back to like October 27th, 28th. Yeah. But we got paid though. We got paid for each additional week.
Hey, at least you got that going for you there.
Good money too.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And you bring up some of the places you brought up there, kind of brought back some memories for me, because when I was in the Navy, I was stationed in San Diego, and we went all throughout Southeast Asia on deployment: Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, like all over. So when you're bringing up some of those countries, bringing up some memories I had there, like the first time we went to Singapore, you had to apply for overnight liberty in a foreign port.
Right.
And some friends of mine, we were like, you know what? Heck with it. Let's go. We did it. And we sprung for this package at this airport, at the hotel, where they had this private guest only bar in there. And, it was basically free at the bar. So other people that were in there were all like, oh, we'll grab a beer at a time. Some of my friends and I, we were grabbing 3, sometimes 4 at a time, taking them over to our table. And good Lord, we got so damn hammered. We walked over to the McDonald's around the corner, got whole bags of, and I've never seen this here in the States, but double McChickens.
Yeah.
And we ate those, went to bed, and we ended up, I realized this later, we ended up getting called back because something happened. We got called back, and I ended up being in the bed right by the phone.
Yeah.
And I got told about this later, that the person that called ended up hanging up on me because they were like, okay, we need you back here by midnight. And I was so fucking hammered that they told me that. I was like, midnight? It's already midnight. I can't be in 2 places at once. They hung up on me, and somebody else called back, and I'm like,
yeah,
all right, thanks. And we got back over there. Oh God, that next day was horrible. I was hungover as hell. But I've got so many of those types of stories from that whole time.
I think too, we were talking about Japan earlier. My most memorable moments in Japan were Okinawa, Kadena, Yokosuka, Misawa. What was the other place? It was a naval base.
I know Yokosuka is a naval
Yokosuka.
base. Yeah, I know somebody that used to be stationed there.
Yeah, beautiful place, man. Okinawa was beautiful.
I've heard and I've seen a lot of stuff from there, so
yeah,
I've always thought it would be cool to go over to Japan for. I mean, it wouldn't even have to be a big show like Wrestle Kingdom or something like that, although that would be cool.
mm-hmm.
But I've seen the videos of those the sleep pod hotels.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I kind of want to just for the curiosity of it all, go stay in one of those, go to the show, and then fly back.
Yeah.
For some reason, I think that would just be the coolest thing ever.
Oh yeah. It was a blast, man. I really enjoyed that. I would love to go back and just visit Japan. I mean, because it was so clean there, and the people. I heard before I went, people were saying, "Oh, they're the rudest people. They're this, that, the other." That was bullshit. They were some of the best people you'll ever meet in Japan. Some of the friendliest, nicest people.
I can say that about a few different countries. And excuse me, my dog went inside.
You're fine.
But I can say that about a few of the countries in Southeast Asia, that some of the nicest people I ever met. I remember being in, I want to say Philippines, and one of the first watches that I had was going around on the patrol boat with the Philippine security that they had helping us. And while we were out there roaming around, one of them had a big old thing of the Filipino fried chicken, and they're just like, "You want some?" I'm like, "Yes, please." But yeah, some of the nicest people that I've met, just the most polite, and it was a good time.
Yeah.
God dang, dog, getting some energy out right now. But another country that you, God damn. Okay, but pardon me there. Hey. Another country that you had been to that heard about in the video, that I don't know if you can tell the story because, well, Brazil.
Oh yeah, I can tell it.
Okay, I want to hear it, because you didn't go too into detail on that Facebook Live video, but I was like, when I heard the little bit, I'm like, I want to ask about this.
Yeah. We were, I was in Rio, I was by myself, and it was for a little small promotion there. They produced really good shows, really good money.
Excuse me, I'm going to get these dogs calmed down real quick.
You're fine.
Back. All right, well, we're back. I got my dogs calmed down, but we were going into Brazil.
Yeah, Rio, yeah. I don't remember exactly the name of the company. I was there maybe 3 days. I was supposed to have been there 8 or 9 days.
Okay.
And it was 8 or 9 days. It was like 12 shows total. It was 2 days. And about 4 days in, I was the heel, and I had been working this same place. It was like a nightclub, but it was like an indoor-outdoor venue.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so during the day, you would have wrestling outside, and at night, you'd be inside.
Gotcha.
And so I was the heel, and I remember giving this guy hell, 2-3 days in a row. And I didn't speak any Spanish. Poquito español, a little Spanish. So, and some of the wrestlers in the back were like, say this and say that. And I didn't know what the hell I was saying, but I was, repeating what they were telling. And so I ended up saying the wrong thing. And this guy was pretty fucking pissed, and he's like coming at me. And he kept saying something in Spanish, and the referee was like, kept pulling me by the trunks and was pulling me back. And the guy was telling me he was going to kill me. So the referee, Spanish guy here, he knew what the hell was going on. So he kept pulling me and he's telling me in English, this guy's going to kill you, man. I'm like, nah. So I didn't know he had a knife in his hand.
Oh boy.
So he was coming at me. I don't know if you can see it.
I kind of see a little something there.
Yeah, right here. I got stabbed here. And I got stabbed here.
Oh yeah, I see the little,
Yeah, right here. He come in first to the gut and then he come up like that. And when he did, I didn't even know I'd got stuck. So I beat his ass. I felt a burning sensation. That's all I felt. I didn't know he had stabbed me. And my initial response was to beat his ass, take him down.
Oh yeah.
So I remember the referee grabbed one side of him. I grabbed the other side. I remember when I grabbed his arm, I seen the knife. So I immediately started elbowing him. And he went down, and as I was elbowing him, somebody else was coming at me. So I'm trying to clock him and keep this guy down. The referee's trying to pull me back off this guy. And I flipped. I just snapped. And I just started beating his ass. You couldn't get me off of him. So a bunch of the wrestlers had to come out and pull me off the guy. And finally, they got me to the locker room and I got arrested. And they were like, my first time to the country, they seen what was wrong with me. And they were like, well, this is self-defense. This is self-defense. But you went a little too far. You could have put him down and then left the scene. You went back to the locker room like they were trying to get me to do. But by that time, I was so pissed off because I was like, this guy's trying to kill me.
Yeah.
So I just did what I had to do. I didn't give a shit. I was like, no, this ain't gonna happen.
No.
And the way I was raised, you got to take care of yourself. And this guy took liberties with my body.
Yeah.
And so I had to do what I had to do. And I went further than what I should have, but I was held for like 2 days in custody. And I had contacted home. My dad had called the feds. And so the feds were already there. They had an office set up there. So they come to where I was at and seen what was going on, seen the video and all the stuff. And they were like, look, we're going to get you out of here. Just give us some time. I think by the third day, which is 7 days total, like 4 feds come got me, took me to the airport, had my bags and shit. They were like, look, get on this plane. Here's your paperwork. You got to sign this agreement. You're never to come back to this country. It's like 5 years. You can't come back to this country for 5 years. I still got the paperwork. I'll send you the copies of it. I don't mind sharing that.
Okay.
Anyway, put me on a plane and I flew back. I ended up going to Mexico, stopped in Mexico, and then I ended up going to Texas, and then North Carolina, and never went back. But I mean, they stitched me up and everything, and luckily they were trying to give me some time, but the judge was like, it was a female judge too. They were like, no, young man, he doesn't have a record. We've seen the video, it was self-defense. We can't let him come back to our country. So they canceled my visa and all that shit, and made sure, I got back to where I was going. And was to never enter the country again, which I hadn't been back. This was over 20 years ago. And that's pretty much what had happened in a nutshell. Another incident had took place when I lived in Puerto Rico. I worked for Carlos Colon.
I've heard some crazy stories about there.
Yeah. Working for Carlos, riots. Got into my partner at the time was Eric Alexander. We were tag teaming. We were going against a tag team called Delta Force. And Delta Force, even though they were the heels, they were like baby faces. Fans loved them. And me and Eric, we had our comeback in this match, and we were beating them up. Eric did something and swung a chair. When he swung a chair, it slipped out of his hands. It flew across the floor and hit this guy in the shins or something like that. My back was to him, so I didn't really see what happened. And I remember Eric was speaking fast Spanish. He speaks very good English, but he was speaking fast Spanish. And when they speak fast Spanish, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So I turned and looked, man. And by this time, there was a mob coming at us. And so that was common there, man, to get in fights in Puerto Rico before your match, after your match, during your match. it didn't happen too often, but there was the fans were rowdy, man. They throw spark plugs, bricks, rocks, 2x4s. My God, there was all kinds of the things that they would throw at you. Food, food. And so I begged Carlos. I was like, Carlos, I got to be a baby face, and I got to run by myself. I got to do this thing by myself. And I love teaming with Eric, but at the same time, I wanted to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So, and then I went on my separate ways. I'll tell you what happened there. I don't mind talking about this either. I went in initially. I was in Missouri at the time. I was working with Harley Race, and I worked maybe a couple months there, and I had sent video to Carlos. I said, look, I'm interested in coming in working for your company, getting the experience, and, what do you pay and stuff like that. He immediately called me the time he got the video. He liked everything. And I actually talked to Jovica Victor, is who I talked to. He was the money man. And they said, okay, we'll pay you $400 a week. After a couple months, we'll give you a raise. And I think my pay went up to about 600, roughly 600. And it was good. Pay was good for about 8 months. And then the economy just took a nosedive. So it went from 600, 500, 500, 400, 400, 300, stuff like that. And then it would go back up to, 450. And I couldn't, the agreement was initially 400. And after time, I'd get paid 600.
Yeah.
And they just didn't keep their word. Even when the business picked up, like Anniversary, they would sell out. I mean, there'd be thousands and thousands of people. And a lot of the venues we went to, there was 5,000 and 6,000 people. And you're talking $12, $15 a ticket. Your roster only consists of about 16 to 18 wrestlers. So you're paid, the guys that you're paying are basically local guys. So they're really not making a lot of money. And then, the Americans that were coming in, I made pretty decent money. And I just told them, look, either you pay me or I got to go. And I remember it was a Friday, and I was probably 10 months into the agreement. And they didn't pay me that Friday because we get paid initially on Friday mornings. We go to the office, we do TV interviews, which on Tuesdays, and then we go on Fridays and do interviews as well, because we'd have to work Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. That was the show days. And then I remember I had my payday set up for Fridays. Jovica would have my envelope with cash, and I would go get my money and go back to the bank, deposit my money. And I worked a shoot job too. Now I worked a shoot job at the airport. I worked for Capitol Police, Monday through Thursday, and the rest of Thursday through Sunday. So anyway, long story short, I had a falling out with Jovica and Carlos. I left that Friday because I didn't have my money. I was like, okay, I'm going to do Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'm going to leave Monday. I'm not even going to tell them. But I made a phone call to IWA, Salvia Vega. And I remember talking to, what is his name? Guy that owned the company, Victor Quiones.
Oh, okay.
Victor, he's dead now. He died years ago. But I remember talking to Victor, and he said, look, I'm going to put you on the phone with Salvi and, tell Salvi what's going on. So I talked to Salvi. He immediately knew who I was. He was like, I like your gimmick. Do you have any bloomas, which is feathers, headdress? And I said, no, I don't have any bloomas. He was like, I got some. I'm going to buy you some. He bought me a brand new headdress, had it shipped in. He said, go ahead and wrestle the weekend. Don't let nobody do nothing or let nobody know nothing. Monday morning, be here at 10 o'clock. You're going to shoot vignette. You're going to do a vignette. So I remember I wrestled that weekend, did everything you told me to do, did TV that night, that morning. That night, they started advertising me. Carlos had no idea. So I was being advertised for Carlos's company, and I was being advertised on Salvio Vega's company. And Carlos had no idea until Tuesday morning what was going on. Oh, he was pissed. I jumped ship in the middle of the night, so to speak. But they offered me way more money.
Hey.
So I said, okay. And this thing is, they gave me 2 weeks pay when I started.
All right.
Yeah. So that's how it went, man. And Salvio did me good. I remember Dutch was there. The guy, Invader, the guy that killed Bruiser Brody, he was doing the booking. Jose Gonzalez.
Yeah.
I did not like Jose. I'll tell you a good story for this video. Brian Lee was there when I started. Brian Lee started the same day. Brian had went to rehab, got out of rehab. He's real good friends with Salvio. He was like, I'm gonna put you and Brian together to do a storyline. I was like, cool, that's no problem. Well, Brian remembered me from when I was down in WWE. He was like, no, man, you don't want to put us against each other, work us as a tag team. And so that was initially what was going to happen. We were going to do angles where it would set us up as a tag team. But Brian got to messing with this shit. He got to messing with, I ain't gonna say what he was doing, but he got to messing with the shit. We were living above the office where we do all the TV, where we do TV and interviews and all kinds of stuff to get ready for the shows. But we had a condo up above the TV studio, and Brian was out of it, bro. He was out of it. And I remember I'm laying in my bed and he's in his room, supposedly sleeping. He's getting geeked up. He leaves. I heard the front door shut and he come back. So I get up to see who it is, because over there you just don't, you tell up and you check, make sure there's nobody else in your house.
Yeah.
So I come in there and Brian's like pacing, walking back and forth, going in and out of the bathroom. The shower was on. And I see steam coming from under the door. And next thing I know, Brian comes out butt ass naked. This is a true story. You can ask Salvia Vega, you can ask Dutch Mantel, you ask anybody who was there at this time, they'll tell you. Brian runs, we had this big back door where the kitchen was at. Brian's so geeked up, butt ass naked. He runs full force through this big ass metal door, straight through this fucking door, bro. When he goes through the door, he's screaming, I got demons after me. I got demons after me. Something's after me, screaming. He's jumping from building to building and climbing walls, butt ass naked. True story.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Brian Lee, the Underfaker.
You know what? I was just hearing about that storyline of his, but speaking of a few other people that I wouldn't mind getting to talk to at some point, but you bring up Bruiser Brody when you were talking about some of the crazy stuff people in the crowds would do. It made me think of Bruiser Brody was an absolute favorite of mine, and hearing some of the stories in that Dark Side of the Ring episode and some of the crazy stuff that they would tell about times in Puerto Rico, it got me thinking about that.
Yeah. I do remember this. Brody was brought up when I was there. Brian was the one that brought him up. We were in a production meeting. I'll never forget this. We were in a production meeting and Jose said something out of the way. And Brian speaks Spanish. And Brian looked at him and said, hey, motherfucker. He says, I'll kill you right here just like you killed Brody. He said, you killed one of my heroes. He said, I'll kill you right here in this fucking studio. And he went after him. And Salvia Vega, if it hadn't been for Salvia Vega, Dutch Mantel, and two other guys that were Elion Apollo. Big Apollo. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
Vaguely.
He was in TNA for a little while.
Okay.
If they hadn't been there, he'd have killed him. He'd have killed him.
I can imagine it would take a few people to hold a guy of his size back.
Brian's huge, man. You're talking about guys like 6'7", 350 pounds. This guy was fucking huge. Nicest guy when he was sober. One of the sweetest people you want to meet. I love him to death. When he was sober, he was a sweetheart. But when he was lit, he was a demon. And I don't care. I'll tell anybody this, and I'll tell Brian, because we tried to straighten Brian out. When I was in Florida with Brian, I dated a girl there, and Brian was living with her at the time because his parents had kicked him out. And we tried so hard to get Brian off that shit, and we couldn't do nothing. We couldn't do anything. So the girl that was dating Brian, we had to call her. Matter of fact, we called his ex-wife. He said, "You got to come get him, or he's going to die. He's going to die right here in this fucking house. He's doing that much shit." So finally, we got him some help. He went to a rehab, and I hadn't seen Brian since. This was back in 2005. Yeah, 2005 is when this took place. Then I ended up going back to Puerto Rico and working for Savio after that too. And but I haven't seen Brian since then. I haven't. The only time I seen Brian after that was when he did the TNA gimmick.
Okay, yeah.
For a very short time, and that was it. And hadn't heard nothing else about him. And he looked good. He looked healthy when I saw him on TV. And I pray that he's healthy today and he's okay. I mean, I do think about him from time to time, and I just pray that he's not on that stuff, man. Because I've seen so many people die. A lot of my friends die from that shit. Alcohol poisoning mixed with pills.
Oh yeah.
You mind if I make a quick phone call? I got to wake somebody up.
Oh yeah, I can pause it real quick.
Can you pause it right fast, Mike?
Yeah.